Hey guys, welcome back. I am nervous about this video. However, I have stated countless times on my channel that I am all about the makeup. I don't like to get caught up in all of the controversies because really, if you think about it, pretty much every brand has had some sort of controversy around it, and I'm not saying that that's okay. All I'm saying is that if I were to boycott every brand that had ever misstepped, and that is not to minimize what some of these brands have done, but if I was to boycott every brand that had a controversy attached to its name, there would be very few brands left, if any, to review on this channel. People don't have to have the same reaction to things as each other. That is just the nature of life. We all disagree. We can disagree respectfully, but we can disagree. That's how rational thought has developed over time. But what I found in even just doing a search on YouTube was that there's not a lot of videos talking about this palette. And to me that suggests one of two things is likely happening. One is people are boycotting the brand and so they're not going to buy the palette to review because they don't want to give any sort of semblance of supporting KVD. Or on the other hand, there may be people who are interested in the palette but are afraid to post on it because of this fear of backlash. I can honestly say that I have a little bit of nervousness about that. But from my perspective, as a largely review-based channel, I wanted to give unbiased information. So yes, I have my personal feelings about Kat Von D as a human being. Yes, I have my personal opinions on how the brand has displayed itself over time. But I want to set those feelings aside and just take a critical look at this product and the powders that are inside of it and give honest, unbiased information to you as a viewer because you may be debating whether or not you want to put your money towards this. So that is the purpose of the video. Having said that, let's do this. So this is, like I said, the Fetish palette. This recently released as part of her holiday collection, and it goes for $76 on the Canadian Sephora website. For that, you get 24 eyeshadows. So as with most of my reviews, I'm going to take it from the outside onto the inside. I cannot fault Kat Von D for her packaging. It is eye-catching, it's stunning. All of this lettering is sewn on, so there is just that element of extraness, if you will. The shades are listed on the back. It's not necessarily as eye-catching as last year's cathedral window themed one, I don't have that one, or as the 10th anniversary palette was, but it's still got this nice extra detailing in terms of the stitched on lettering and the sleek black with sort of this patent kind of look to it. Then we open it up and there's the 24 shadows. So there is obviously a great big mirror in there with a lot of fingerprints, but that's beside the point. There are the shadows. So these shadows all have titillating little names to go with the fetish theme. I'm not going to read all of them, but things like sex, suspension, latex, submissive, bondage, dominatrix, and cuffs. You get the idea. That's the kind of theme that we're working with here. I am not a prude by any stretch, and frankly, when I'm doing my makeup, I'm not looking at the names, I'm looking at the colors. So frankly, if I ever had a palette that had no names, I wouldn't really give two craps about that. I don't create looks to think, oh, okay, well, I want a little bit of sex and a little bit of cuffs going on my eyeballs. No, I want brown and gold, or whatever the case may be. So while I think the names are over the top and really designed for shock value, I'm not gonna get too caught up in it because I don't really care about the names. So let's talk about the shadows. The layout of this palette makes my eye twitch, to be honest. There's no defining theme here. You got a bright purple over here and a mustardy yellow, and then everything else is pretty much cool toned with the exception of the two gold and brass kind of shimmer shadows down here and the red. It's a little bit jarring, it's a little bit awkward. There's really not much in the way of transition shades except for maybe this one and Safe Word over here. I used Naughty up here as my transition shade today, and it's frankly a little bit dark for that. I really had to blend it. When you're spending $76 on a palette and there are 24 shadows in it, maybe more than just one transition shade would be helpful. There are, I'm sure, people who save up in order to buy the holiday collections because they usually are fairly epic, and maybe they don't have an extensive collection as well to reach from, so one or two more transition-y type shades would have been helpful in here. In terms of the finishes, there is a mix of matte and shimmers, and then there are two much more metallic shades here. What I will say for a positive on this is that I do like that it is largely cool toned. I think that's very different for what's on the market. It steps away from those warm neutral palettes that many brands do release, and it gives you something different to work with. I will say a lot of the shades in here kind of remind me of the 10th anniversary palette. I returned that ultimately simply because I just was never reaching for it. The shadows themselves performed well, but every time I looked at it, I had no idea what to do with it. I had a really hard time coming up with looks using that palette. But this is kind of reminiscent, but in a very different setup. Having said that, the shimmer shadows that they've put in here I think are a good choice. You've got a nice silver, you've got a more cranberry shade over here, the goldy tones, and then sort of like a lilac shade over here as well. Some of these darker shadows also have shimmer in them. I'm on the fence about that. If it's executed well, I don't care. I find you can still use those to put on the lower lash line or even buff into the crease because the glitter particles in it, if you will, are so small that it really doesn't matter. But there have been a few duds in here. I am not going to do finger swatches of this palette, and the reason for that is because having played around with it for as long as I have now, the finger swatches are very misleading. This is a situation in which the finger swatches perform far better than what the actual shadows do when you use a brush. And for shimmery shadows, I don't care about that because oftentimes I will just apply a shimmery shadow with my finger, but for matte shadows, it becomes problematic because you have these deep, dark, rich colors, in particular this green. That's what I have on my lower lash line today with a little bit of black right up at the lash line itself. And it looks very much like the shimmery shadow that I have on the top minus the shimmer. When you finger swatch it, it is bold and vibrant and beautiful, but I cannot build that color up. It just does not translate on my eyes the way that it translates onto my finger or that it looks in the pan. These shadows here are so frustrating to work with. So this is Chastity and Submissive. Again, they will finger swatch nicely, but I cannot pick up any sort of payoff on a brush with these. Even when I really sort of dig into it, use a really dense flat brush, which would normally pick up anything, and spray it with Fix Plus, it still just looks so underwhelming on the eyes. I have to use my fingers with them, and even at that, these shadows do tend to fade. So this shade right here is called Rope, and I tried using this the other day to make like a warmer brown copper kind of eye look, but when you apply it, it has like a black base to it that you can't see when you look in the pan, and so it just became very smoky, very fast, and it was not what I was expecting, and that just kind of frustrated me. Similarly, this shade here called Blindfold looks like it's going to be sort of a taupey kind of lilac shade in the pan, and it translates a lot darker and grayer once you apply it to your eyes. So I don't know what to tell you with this palette because some of the matte shadows are beautiful. The mustard shade is absolutely gorgeous. That red is so nice and deep and it's beautiful. This look was done using this, but I didn't film it because it was just, I'm frustrated. I just didn't want to. Sorry, I'm a terrible YouTuber. I leave it to you, it's your money. The mattes are quite nice and they do perform like pretty much any other Kat Von D matte eyeshadow that I have used. They do produce kick up, although I found this shade Corset didn't produce an awful lot, but it could have been the brush that I was using because it was more of a flat shader brush than a fluffier blending brush. This shade here called Obsession, I had some issues blending it, although ultimately it was fine and it is workable, but you are going to have to put in a fair amount of effort into that. So I was blathering away and I look up to see that my camera's not recording. Without warning, I don't know when it stopped, so fuck. Okay. I don't recommend this palette. Okay, so basically, I'm frustrated on all fronts, and I'm just going to provide my summary at this point. I know that this isn't the most thorough review, and it's not really up to the standard of the reviews that I typically do, but this palette's not really up to the standard of the palettes that I typically review. So there you go. I don't recommend this palette, and that is completely separate from the controversial aspect. This is just talking about the makeup. There are matte shades in here that are beautiful. The mustard, the red, this dark purple, even to some extent this navy, although you have to work at it, and then this bright purple over here, even the grays. Some of these cooler toned shades are very, very nice. The shimmers leave me wanting more. There are a few that are quite nice. The green, the red, they perform nicely. Even the silver to some extent, although I think the silver in the I Am Divine palette is nicer than this one, but there are just enough shades in here that frustrate me that I regret spending $76 on this palette. But if we strip it down, just look at 24 pans of powder, how do they perform? I'm here to say that at least 7 of them, in my opinion, are not bringing anything to the table. So for me, the matte black, it's not the mattest out there. These 2 across the bottom, in case I haven't made that abundantly clear. The green, so that takes us to 4. This coppery shade, which I don't know what the hell that is, 5. This navy blue with like larger chunks of glitter in it, 6. And then the that taupey weird color over here. There's the 7. Out of 24 shadows, 7 of them underperform, in my opinion. That is a fairly significant percentage. There's the word, I gapped. It's almost a third of the palette. So I will likely be returning this, shall we say, because the 17 shades that are in here that do work very nicely are not so unique that I can't find them elsewhere, so they're not even saved by that. I'm surprised, because normally her holiday palettes knock it out of the park, but I think at least in the last 2 years now, I've been confused by the layout, and at least for me, because I didn't get last year's, this one is a very big disappointment to me. I guess if we were going to be optimists and positive people, the other side of that is that the majority of the shadows are good. So there is that way of looking at it. So it's completely up to your own perspective. That's up for you. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Are you going to pick this up? If you have it, do you enjoy it? All of that kind of thing. If you want to sound off on the controversy, go for it down below. Don't come at me because I did a video on Kat Von D, please. I'm not saying that I'm here to support her and love her. I just gave her a negative review, so that should be apparent. But I just wanted to get honest, unbiased information out to you. At any rate, I'm just going to wrap this up by thanking you for taking the time to watch. I will see you in my next video, and until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.